Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar dedicated to the topic of climate data. I suggest to start just in a few minutes in case we have latecomers that would like to join us along the way. But in the meantime, we would be interesting to know where you are from, so you can share it using the chat. You are using either LinkedIn or YouTube platforms, I think, so don't hesitate to share with us, and in that sense we can test the chat as well, so that would be great for us. So we have mostly French participants now. And I can see that it's both working on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so that is great. Also about general information, so you are currently following the live on those two platforms, but replay will be available, so don't hesitate to share the link later. And we will also share the slides. I know that's very often it's a question that we have, but the slides will be shared on a link in the platform of the replay. And I think we'll start in 1 or 2 minutes. We have Croatian participants that are just saying hi. So it's 2, almost 05, so I think we can start. My name is Élise Giono, and I work as a project manager for the Association Bilan Carbone. I'm very pleased to be hosting this webinar and to introduce you to our speakers today. We had slight change of plans, so our first panelist, Fanny Florio from the ADEME, the French Agency for Ecological Transition, will unfortunately not be able to join us. However, my colleague Joël Touwagé will be presenting the slide that Fanny has kindly prepared for us. Our second speaker, Serge de Galderet, represents the Belgian company FutureProof and will present us their very interesting Launchpad tool. Sadly, our last speakers won't be able to join, but that gives us more time for a question and answer session that is planned at the end of the webinar. And again, you can use the chat to ask your question throughout the presentation. So don't hesitate, we will check. Even if we don't reply right away, we will read the question and we will ask it to the presenter. So about the Association Bilan Carbone, so ABC, It was created 10 years ago to develop and disseminate the bilan carbon method for GHG emission, accounting, and reduction. ABC purpose is to facilitate the energy climate transition for organizations at the French and international levels. In that order, we are developing methods related to GHG emission from accounting to mitigation phase. It promotes synergies between organizations and it supports the international dissemination of French expertise on the matter. Research projects to bring together skills, expertise, to give access to carbon news information, to raise awareness, and to learn on carbon subjects. We are targeting companies, but also public sector, local authorities, universities, consulting firms, etc. And also ABC expand its activities to impact more public, working with various organizations from companies to local authorities, municipalities, and to increase their skills in GHG reduction and low carbon strategy to facilitate the energy climate transition. And for that, we are participating in many projects about climate change awareness, carbon footprint assessment, and we especially contributed to the live Clean Food project. I will share the link in the chat if you're interested. That aimed at spreading the carbon footprint evaluation expertise to other countries, which were Greece, Italy, Hungary, and Croatia. And during this project, ABC developed a calculation tool for to allow voluntary organizations involved in the project to calculate their carbon footprint and implemented an online platform that serves as a common basis for carbon accountability and low carbon transition in Europe. About the calculating carbon footprint, the first thing to calculate organization carbon footprint is a calculation tool. The main thing to remember is that there are several methodologies with small differences, but they are all working on the same way, which is converting activity data into GHG emissions with the specific climate data called emission factor. But those emission factors fluctuate regarding geographical areas. For example, to produce energy, all countries don't use the same resource. So, for example, fossil versus renewable, and all motor burn more gas than a new one. So the emission factor varies with the age of the fleet. That's why we need specific GHG emission factor to reflect the country's realities. Considering the fact that several methodologies are available to calculate the carbon footprint, but the key element is the climate data reflecting country specificities. That's why through this webinar, we wanted to highlight some data and give you key elements to understand how this data is managed. So today's panel will attempt to give you answers through their expertise and initiatives at different scales. So whether you're a private or a public sector organization, again, do not hesitate to ask your question in the chat, and we will reply to it at the question and answer session. And for the first panelist, I'm going to give the floor to Joariatou Wage, and she's going to present the ADEM structure.
Thank you, Elise. Hi, everybody. So today I'm going to talk on behalf of ADEM, but ABC is also a member of the steering committee of the Basque Carbon, so we are legitimate to do this presentation today. So we'll talk about the Basque Carbon and GHG reporting. So Basque Carbon, which is the French database of national database of emission factor. To begin with, I will just introduce ADELF in few words for those who don't know the structure or not aware of ADEM. So ADEM is the Agency for Ecological Transition. It's a public agency under the joint authority of the Ministry of Ecology and Ministry of Higher Education and Research. And the main goal of ADEM is to be the point of reference for general public, for many stakeholders, also companies, local authorities, to generalize best practices designed to protect environment, energy saving, and carbon neutrality for the environment part. ADEM also has four main activities. The first one is to developing knowledge, um, financing of research and innovation, to observe the system and to better understand how industries are changing regarding technologies and innovation, and also the cost for that. The second activity is to convince and to mobilize through public awareness and to inform the stakeholders to change mindset, behaviors, and practices through increasing action with the various communication, information, and publication too. The third activity is an advising activity, which being establishing tools and methods for beneficiaries. It could be direct advice with experts or via relay structures. And finally, ADEM is also assisting with implementations, different stakeholders. Um, at regional and at national references. As you can see, ADEM is a big structure with 1,000 people employed in three different sites in France mainland, but also in overseas territories. And we have 26 regional delegations, so which can allow to disperse the activities and the help of ADEM at national level. And there's also one office in Brussels for all activities regarding the international level and cooperation between ADEM, Europe, or other countries. To present the base carbon, we will go through 4 points. The first one is to have a quick look on the base carbon. And maybe the most interesting things is to understand the concept and how does it work. And finally, we will go through a few slides to have a look on the base carbon, which is available in French but also in English, and we'll have some screenshots in English to see you how is the base carbon. So the base carbon. Base carbon means, if I try to translate in English, a carbon basis, but it's a database of emission factors, and which is firstly developed since 2004, when ADEM created the first French bill on carbon methodology to help the organizations to reduce their emissions. And at this stage, the bill on carbon is constituted with a method, a training, and a tool. But as it is the same structures who developed the three parts, there is no distinction between the bill on carbon and the base carbon. As Elise presented in the introduction, the calculation tool and the emission factor database are the two elements to do to calculate the carbon footprint of an organizations. So ADEM has things, all aspects to develop the bill on carbon methodology. We have to keep in mind that the main objective of bill on carbon is to calculate the carbon footprint, to obtain results, and to make an internal audit type of approach in order to identify the risk opportunities, but mostly to implement mitigation action to reduce GHG emissions. So after that, we have also the reporting goal, but it's not just the main goal. And the bilan carbon covers three scopes, which in the GHG accounting, and we have all posts from inside emissions produced inside, produced upstream or downstream, and the idea is to taking into account all emissions linked to the activity. And we have a simple tool developed on an spreadsheet on an Excel table to have some graphs to be able to communicate about the results and some table. And initially, we have a specific sheet dedicated to emission factors. And after this specific sheet was developed on a specific tool called the BAS Carbon to have all the emission factors on one place. So today, the bilan carbon is owned by Association Bilan Carbon, and the BAS Carbon is a property of ADEME. You see that there is a trademark because it's a proper name, and it's freely available in French and in English on a specific ADEME website. So you have to identify the website called Bilanges ADEME, because ADEME has several websites. And this specific website held the BAS carbon and all the emission factors. So the BAS carbon is not a calculation tool, as it's the goal of the bilan carbon, but it's only a database of emission factors for organization to do their GHG reporting and to find climate data regarding activities and process. And it comes with an online consultation of the database and its documentation. I will see you later on the slide how it looks like. But you have also the option to download the database and its documentation and a monitoring table of a modification too. There is also a forum to allow exchanges and to allow public to ask questions about any aspects, any data available on the BAS carbon. Today, you can see some figures about the BAS carbon. We have more than 5,000 emission factors. It is more than it's also a huge community with nearly 4,500 members, and each week we have around 250 new members and also 22 contributors. So it's an important aspect, and we'll come back on the contributors on the next slide. Oops, sorry. So how does the BAS carbon works, and it's the opportunity to see the four concepts on which it is based. So you see that you can subscribe on the Bilanges website to access freely on the BAS carbon. So the first pillar is to have an open data for this climate data to allow organizations, public, other stakeholders to access and to do carbon footprint of their organization, or to have any information about the process regarding the GHG emission part. And this is the main idea of the bilan carbon. And second one, it's also important to have a transparency regarding this data. That is why for each emission factors, you have a detailed documentation which explains you the assumption used and the construction of the data, the sources of the data too, if it's produced by ADEME or by any other one, and also to have the scopes used and the way it will be constructed, and all the information you have to also all the information you need to have to to see how this data was built. Um, with the base carbon, we have also the opportunity to have a multi-regulatory approach. Uh, Firstly, the base carbon was designed to calculate GHG emission with the main goal to have a reduction through the mitigation actions. But we have developed many regulations, and this database is also used to answer to these regulations. And finally, regarding all the data we can gather, it's important to have a shared governance with the ADEM, but also users' representations, contributors' representations, public representations. As you see that it is on the joint authority of the two different ministries. That is the way the administration of the base carbon is carried out by ADEM to have some orientation and to validate some approach with the steering committee called the COGO to have the various stakeholders represented. And now, how does it work? Regarding the data, on the previous slide, you see that there is 22 contributors because all the data available on the base carbon are not produced by ADEM. This is important. You have some data produced by ADEM when ADEM carried out some studies. There are two cases. ADEM can carry out a specific studies with a large steering committee for one specific sectors. For example, for inputs or home equipment or transport. And Adam could also carried out a study with a selected steering committee, circular economy or other study which is not sectoral, which not need a sectoral approach. And all the data carried out for this publication can be used to feed the base carbon. And you could also have other contributors like companies or other who calculated their own emission factors and can feed the database, the base carbon with it as a third part. And in this case, we need to check the validity of the data through a process. So firstly, the data is proposed at the steering committee, and the steering committee has to check if it's compatible with the methodology, the scope, the perimeter defined for the whole base carbon. And then the data could be denied or it can be validated. And when it's denied, it's not the end. The contributor has the possibility to, uh, to work again on the data to have to fill in the gap and to have a new review of its data to be integrated on the base carbon. And finally, when the data is validated, there is a kind of a date if it's available during 3, 5, 10 years. And for some of the data, for example, for energy, we are able to have data each year. So some data are archived, but still available. You can be able to consult them on the base carbon, but they are tagged as archived data. Um, I mentioned several times the steering committee of the bilan carbon called the COGO, and it is composed of a member to have a various representation of all stakeholders, consultant firm, which are so many users as carbon when they are doing some work for clients, business representatives too, the French ministers as public body, local authorities, associations of carbon as also users of the database, and sometimes we have some qualified persons and other structure. And the goal is to give an issue and to validate the orientation and the development of the database, to enrich also the database, and to validate the new data. And you see that it's really important to have this kind of structure, to have a robust database with the with the data with higher quality, and to assure that they are all designed on the same way. So now let's have a look on a few slides. We do the screenshots with the English version to see that it's available in this language. Um, when you log in on the Bass Carbon website, you will see that there is a specific structure with the categories of emissions quantified in a GHG assessment for organization. For now, it's based on the ISO uh, version 2006, but it's still an ongoing process to be compatible with the last version of the ISO. But we have now it's divided now on three scopes. So we have the scope 1, 2, and 3. With a lot of data on the scope 3, because it's really important to take into account this perimeter on your carbon footprint, to be able to have as much as possible way to reduce your GHG emissions. So of course we have um, goods, inputs, passenger transport, waste treatments, some, and most of the time when you are looking for data which is not available, it's data from the scope 3. But you have more than 200 emission factors on this scope for now. We talk about the 5 status from generic. I can maybe do explain in detail what is the difference between the two valid status. You have generic valid and specific valid. Generic valid means that it's an emission factors which can be used by all 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 public, and specific valid is an emission factors which is valid, but only for a specific company. For example, if you are using uh, an electric car designed by a specific company, and which has produced its own emission factors, you will have an emission factors for the company, and you cannot use it if you don't have a car from this company. But you should have another emission factors, which is an average emission factors for any an average emission factors coming from the flex of the countries. So you can use it as it is a generic emission factors, which can be used by uh, by all. So the specific valid you have it's not the most, but you have some a certain number of emission factors which is tagged with the specific valid statute. And you have also an under discussion status, which is a statute when the emission factors is proposed and is not already valid by the steering committee, but it could be it's still available on the base carbon, and you can follow its progress to see if it will be validated or denied. Um, as you see, there are more than 500 emission factors. So to find your emission factors, you need to have a specific structure. That's why there is a several search engine with filters to be able to find your emission factors easily when you consult the base carbon online. You have the first engine by tag, so you can just enter the name of the process of the activity to find your emission factors. And after that, you can also use all the filters to reduce the number of results through the unit, the contributors, the localization, etc. This is an example from scope 1 from energy. You have the natural gas emission factors for 2015. You have the total value, and after that you have also the the detail. When it For the natural gas, it is split into two parts. You have the combustion part and the upstream part, and you have the detail also for the different gases. Um, and finally, the result is on the CO2 equivalent. But you have the detail, and you know that which gases is emitted when you use natural gas. Sorry for the noise. Another example, you have here, oh, sorry, maybe it's important here, you have the uncertainty of the emission factors. For each emission factors, you have an uncertainty. And it sees that it's calculated with a scientific process. That's why it's important to give to the users uncertainty. For energy emission factors, you see that it's 5% here, but sometimes you can have a 100%. Yes. For the input part, when you use many assumptions, you could have 80 to 100% of uncertainties. But the idea is to have an order of magnitude of the emission factors to see finally if it's important to work on and to design some mitigation action on this post or not. But it's important to have this data, and when a contributor, an external contributor proposed a data, of course, he should indicate this result too. And here you have also other processes which is validated, like the transparency of the data, the quality, the name of the contributor. For example, you can see here that ADEME is not the contributor, it's GRT Gaz, so a French company working on energy. And for each data, you have also a documentation with a short description and all the detail of the calcul to obtain the emission factors with the construction of the emission factors, which assumption, the perimeter, more detail on the experiment done to calculate the data. So if you need to have more information about an emission factors, you should consult the documentation associated. So I hope you learn more about the bas carbon. Thank you for your attention. Maybe Fanny will join the webinar during the question and answer session. So if you have some question about the bas carbon, do not hesitate to write it on the charts. And I invite you to go to the Bilanges website to create your accounts and to consult the bas carbon. And if you have any question after that regarding a specific data or how to use the bas carbon, you can write an email to this email address. And if you have already used the bas carbon, you can write it on the chat. So thank you, and I will give the floor to Serge.
Yes, hello. Hi.
Hi. Maybe you have the right to share your screen, and I will.
Normally, my screen should be shared. Now, let's see. Let's see. Yeah. I'll go to the presentation.
Yes,
It's
okay. Yeah, great.
Okay. I was just asking a question to my one of our team members here, because we're actually using the BCAR also in one of our new tools, and so I was trying to get the latest about that. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Serge de Geldere. I'm from Belgium. We're based in Leuven. We're a small team with 16 people for the moment, and we work that I launched many years ago. Our idea is to focus on climate change because we believe, I'm going to put this on black for a second, we believe it's one of the main challenges we're looking towards as a society. It's probably arguably the most pressing problem we're ever encountering. However, we also believe that if we do this well, we can find even short-term benefits in moving off of fossil fuels. And with our small company, we try to work on this with two levers, working towards cities and towards business. As a side head, I also have different functions, raising awareness through lectures and media appearances. And I also lead a citizen action in court with over 60,000 Belgian citizens arguing for more ambitious climate targets in Belgium. So today I'm going to take a bit of time to talk about what we do mainly for cities. In our work for cities, we have worked for many years as consultants. Recently, 4 years ago, we changed our approach, and instead of working as consultants, drawing up climate plans, assembling emission inventory reports, we productized all of that, and we created a platform called FutureProof Cities. Recently, we've done the same move for business. For years, we've worked as consultants for business, helping them establish this carbon footprint using tools such as Bilan Carbone and others, following the greenhouse gas protocol, drawing up scenarios on what to do to reduce their impact, and also on how to gain from that. And again, it's very important that both cities and companies understand that this is not purely an ideological or philanthropical approach for the good of the planet or for the good of the next generations, but we also believe there are short-term benefits that you can derive from that. And we believe this is a new conversation to have, because if you propose it like that, suddenly in a company, also the CEO or the CFO is interested and understands that there is ways to reduce costs on the short term, to anticipate risks, disinvestment risks, carbon tax risks, regulation, insurance that will pull away, all of these things that are on the horizon are already happening now. So that's one way to improve your operations. If you look towards the market, there's many solutions to be developed, both in products and in service, to help this transition to a fossil-free economy, and you can improve your brand with that. So for companies, we have this consultancy still, but we are just preparing and launching in September, actually, our first version of a platform called Carbon Cap, which is essentially, if I have some time, maybe I can show a bit of what it looks like now, but it is a platform, a software as a service that draws on data from the base carbon, just as explained a couple of minutes ago, that enhances that data to regionalize it and complete it a bit more, and then makes it into a usable platform to not only design your carbon footprint, but also to map scenarios and report and collaborate with your whole team in one place digitally to establish a baseline and turn your climate roadmap into reality and see how much you can gain from it in CO2 reduction, also in financial and co-benefits. So this is work in progress. What I'm here to talk about today is our second activity, which is for cities. And for cities, we've developed several things. We've developed actually an approach that is in part open source and in part SaaS platform. Starting from the realization that transitions are really hard, but that cities are an ideal place to drive the transition. And we see that because there are many organizations that exist, like a Covenant of Mayors, C40, Eurocities, Energy Cities, ECLAY, all of them, working with cities to help those cities accelerate the climate transition. However, we see from our experience in our previous work as consultants that, we face the same kind of issues in cities. It's often a very small team that has to drive the energy transition. They're overwhelmed by what to focus on. What should I take on first? Should I work on reusable cups for public events, or should we work on getting a permit for 3 extra wind turbines, or for collective renovations of a neighborhood? It's very hard to know which of the actions you can drive from the city team and where the biggest return is the carbon return, but also financial return for your citizens or investors, and co-benefits, the additional benefits that you get from moving away from fossil fuels and adapting to climate change. And third is the realization that the same problems appear everywhere. We currently have 145 municipalities and agglomerations that run on FutureProof Cities. And many of those teams, whether it's on the political level, the mayor and the council, or whether it's on the technical expert, the administrative level, they reinvent the wheel. They face the same hard problems about financing, about engagement, etc. It's a lot of time and energy wasted. So that's why we created FutureProof Cities, which is a platform, software as a service platform. And I'll take a couple of minutes to show the details to help resolve these things. And we help in 4 ways. It's essentially helping developing a climate plan, starting from a library of pre-calculated, regionalized measures for climate mitigation and climate adaptation. You can adapt those measures and to your context, and we propose targets to help cities quickly develop a climate plan without having to hire people like us and work 6 months on the development of a climate plan. Essentially, what we need to do, we know. And it's essentially a really 20-80 rule. It's always the same top 20 things you will need to do if you really want to make progress on moving off of fossil fuels and preparing for the climate transition. So we do that quickly in collaboration, and we preload the accounts with all the information that is needed so that it's not a blank sheet, but that it's there. Second, we help teams collaborate and look at the progress, distribute the tasks, involve other departments to make it, a cross-departmental effort in city teams. Third, we help cities collaborate between each other. It's still a small group, 145 cities, but they learn from each other, and we have some users in France, in Sweden, in Belgium, and we're starting discussions, or we have ongoing discussions elsewhere in Spain, and we recently were selected for the WWF project, in which we might add many more global cities later this year. And finally, we engage stakeholders by helping promote the the actions and the measures that are taken and making them visible so that citizens, businesses, everyone can see what's happening in a city, how they can contribute, how a city is moving towards its target, etc. So this is what we do. It's more than a platform. It's three things. It's actually a platform. It's coaching through our customer success team, and it's also reporting to CDP, Covenant of Mayors, all the administrative stuff you have to do, but that's not currently adding a lot of added value. We take care of that, and it's a license-based model in which cities pay, depending on the population side and the plan they want, a fee that ranges from a couple of €100 to a couple of €1,000 per month, depending on the city size and the skill set, the feature set that they need. And in there is everything they need to get going. So we help start up. We have a very personal follow-up through mail, intercom, and everything. We do the reporting. We push specific content to our users, help with the marketing of their actions towards their citizens so that they have more reach, provide obviously technical support, and we have this community of users that's being created. This is what we have seen in terms of growth. Small start, very slow to build this community with then suddenly several regions starting to join us, with a kind of flat last year almost, and now we're starting to after Corona that things are picking up again. It's a slow process, but it's slow in two directions, because we see that our users, there's a very few users that actually do not renew their license. It's less than 3% churn, if you know the term, of people who don't renew in the last 12 months. And we see that many will actually have a license that is going for a long time, 3 years, 6 years, some cities for 10 years also, because they want, if they start to work on that, they want to work on it for a long time. The open source part of that, and I'll show you the demo in a second, is called Launchpad. Launchpad is the backward looking part of our database. It's the historic emission inventory data that we use to pre-populate the accounts in FutureProof Cities, and we made it public. It's actually a site you will see in a second, in which we look at several levels on a state level, region, province, city level, and try to find the best possible data at the lowest possible level, aggregate everything into one searchable overview so that you can find out what the emission inventories, the history, the evolution in different sectors, but also that you can connect to this data. If you're building an app or having an application, you can connect to the data with an application programming interface. And much like the BCAR, we have also a system through our customer success and mail, less structured than what you have at ADEM, but in which we will get feedback from people in different regions saying, hey, there's another better data source, or you can find there. We just disclose everything, where we get it from, how recent it is, but we wanted to kind of make this part not a thing anymore. We don't believe we should spend a lot of time looking at the past. For us, it's more important to understand, what are science-based goals for the future? How do we need to, focus on the measures that matter? When will it be enough when we have X number of renovations in our city, etc., and manage towards that. So that's that. I'm going to be available, obviously, for questions afterward. Just a final slide, and I'll spread those as a PDF after the meeting. showing where we are now. We have an overview that aggregates all the accounts. So these are estimates. The data is wrong, but it's good enough to give you order of magnitudes. 145 municipalities for the moment. When we look at their climate plans, that's the aggregated amount of investment plans, now invested so far, with an estimation of almost 400 million euros saved every year through energy savings, 550 public measures, 1,200 actions, and an estimated 1 million ton of CO2 saved through the actions that those cities are taking. All right. Now let's go to a short couple of demos on demo accounts. This is carbon cap. By the way, I won't go into detail there for the moment, but this is just an overview of what it would look like in real. It's a prototype, but I'll get back to that if we have time later on. So this is a live demo. It's a fake account in which all of us can play around. So don't look too much at the real figures that are in here. It just gives you an information. First of all, which is maybe the behind the scenes, because this is today's topic. All of the emission inventory data that we get from Launchpad are pre-filled in this account and is always available for review and edit. You know, the general data that we pre-populate about, for instance, the populations or the number of households, or how many company cars we estimate this given city has, how many tertiary and private buildings, all of that. Obviously data on energy usage with statistics, and then variability compared to other users on the platform, and the usage of different sectors. Then emission factors, much like in the base carbon, which was described previously for electricity or heat or others. All of that is available. It's also editable if a given city works with an own source of renewable energy or has a specific transportation solutions. They can adapt it, but it's pre-populated so that we can get to work as soon as possible with the city. Then when they log in, this is the view they have. They see emissions towards the past that are validated, and then the prognosis towards their emission reduction, to which we will add a Paris agreement trajectory soon, so that you can see what the gap is between your planned actions and where you should be if you take into account the 1.5 degree goal, or the carbon budget for your region, or even for your city. And then the measures are organized in what we call a climate plan, which can be a climate plan using the classical sectors from a covenant of mayors, or using certain themes that you would have, or district in your company. You can reorganize the same plan to your liking, and use it as you want. And then in this plan, you will have several measures for floor insulation, whatever, different type of measures that can show you, what target you should set if you want to reach a certain reduction. In this case, for instance, between now and 2030, this city should at least do 36,000 roof insulations, and this will create an estimated X amount of CO2 reduction, and will have a financial view of an investment of this much, with a recuperation and a total cost of ownership that is expressed here in this graph with a net present value, and internal rate of return. These things also can always be changed. We just propose them, starting from a database of measures, which includes about 120 measures that are pre-calculated based from different sources, and that are going to be regionalized to the regions in which we work. So we have a search engine with adaptation and mitigation measures. You can start from those, you add them to your climate plan, you set the targets, and then based on what's included in your plan and what your progress is, you can see then immediately where you are, how much you're, for instance, evolving in households, you know, where you are, what the major campaigns will be in your case, measures as we call them, where you are with respect to that, and how all of this influences your trajectory towards a low carbon city. So you can see in which sectors the prognosis will be impacted and improved. But also you can see two other things. This is the CO2 reduction, which is the main thing why we're doing it for. But you can also see what the mitigation costs of this whole plan will be. This means that you can see from your whole plan what the cost and the impact and reduction potential is for each of the measures. Here you have the potential mitigation, the CO2 reduction in ton of CO2 per year. On the vertical axis, you see what the relative cost is per ton of CO2. And the measures that are on top here are measures that don't have a financial payback, that will essentially cost netto money. On the ones below are the ones that are more profitable and that are ranked as such. And so what you can do is say, let's say you want to do a residual heating network. How can you couple that and bundle it with other measures and then find financing for this package of measures in which you still have a small financial return, but in which you can also reach significant carbon saving. So it's CO2 savings, it's a financial return. And then third is looking at the co-benefits. Because for each of the measures, when you go into the detail of a measure, you can see what the possible co-benefits are for this measure. We explain how it can help make a city more attractive, how it contributes to well-being, maybe a local job creation, and also to what SDGs it helps contribute. And so at the end of the day, this is a very important view we feel for, and I'm going to have to switch to Launchpad in a couple of minutes, to give a full overview, not only of the carbon impact and avoiding climate change, but also how you actually make your city more attractive, how you can create local jobs, improve the value of property or other things, and how your plan actually contributes to sustainable development goals. So we feel this is a very important use of data as well, even though this is still qualitative, it's not quantified yet. It helps have a much broader discussion, because now you're not only trying to save the planet, between brackets, but you're showing the business case of your climate plan, and you're also helping elected officials think about how they can win essentially by addressing energy poverty or air quality issues or affordability of housing or other aspects that matter to them, that actually matter to their re-election, etc. So we believe having a much broader conversation and not just on the technical part is essential in having success in driving the energy transition. Two more things, and then I'm going to show quickly Launchpad also, because this is arguably the most interesting here for you, is that we have an overview account that aggregates all the 145 accounts in an overview, in which you can then see which cities evolve well or faster or slower, but also what municipalities do, where they're progressing, which municipalities have a lot of actions ongoing, etc. And drill through and try to understand what is what, and maybe reach out to your cities that are better at something or are working on the same projects as you are. We also, this is the overview account. It's only available for provinces, intercommunal organizations, or whole regions. In the tool itself, in FutureProof Cities itself, we have a more workable version of that, which is a community in which people ask questions, exchange also measures, and can just reach out to each other and say, hey, how did you do this? This is with an auto translation model, so that we can go from French to Spanish to Swedish. We currently have support for 7 languages, I think. And it's small, but it's only starting, but it's a very important part of what we do. Okay, finally, Launchpad, as was announced. Launchpad is an integral part of what we do with FutureProof Cities. It's the emission inventory part of our database. So the measures part looks towards the future. If I do this and this and this, what will the impact be, and what will the return be in terms of carbon, financials, and co-benefits? Launchpad is looking towards the past. Where are we in terms of emissions? And if, for instance, we look at Sweden, we can look at different levels. So, for instance, here we see for Sweden what their evolution is. If we drill down, we go to a certain region, we see what the impact for the region is. We can go to city level, and then we see what for this given city the evolution is, and how they're evolving. And this we actually do for 95,000 regions, areas in Europe. So we cover most all of Europe almost. It's a very simple interface. You can have you type in a Roeselare, for instance, and then you can find where they are. It's Roeselare or Lund. Yeah, not working here. Yes, Lund, Sweden, or Dijon, France. And so everything is easy to find. You can see also what the evolutions in certain sectors. Households have decreased to 20% there. But the most interesting thing is that we always clearly say where the data is coming from. If we go to Belgium and we say, look, we're looking at province of Namur, we explain here the 3 levels of data sources that we use for this calculation. Some factors you'll find back are on a European level. Others are specific for us in Belgium, and then still others will be specific for the Walloon region in Belgium. The idea and the logic behind Launchpad is to always start as granular as possible. So using public databases and public available material, data points, we go to the city level if possible. If we don't find specific data at the city level, and for certain regions it's like that, we go one up. Can we find anything at the province level? If that's not the case, at the state level, and if that's not the case, at the European level, so that there's always data filled in by default. It might not be the best in terms of resolution, but at least there's something there. And as we move ahead, and as we get feedback from users who are looking at France, for instance, it's a nightmare with all those small regions, it's incredibly dense. It actually is the slowest in terms of interface to to make it work here. If you see at the, you know, every little single commune, I think there are 36,000 communes in France, which is more than in the rest of Europe combined, I think. But we always try to find the best, you know, the most fine data. It's not always possible, but at least there's going to be something in there. And we have an API. It's a bit like Base Carbone. It's open to use. We don't have the fancy review system and data quality indicator yet in there. It's on the radar to ever do that, but for us it's just a way to skip the work on that part. We think everybody should have access to good data and focus mainly on the other part. Is what are we going to do? If this is our baseline, what are we going to do to reduce our carbon impact? But if you're interested in building an app or using this data, please visit Launchpad, and you have all the documentation that you need to connect to the API. If you are aware of any better sources that we can use or errors we might have you know, incurred, please give us a sign, and we'll gladly correct it and improve it. Yeah, so that's pretty much it as far as I'm concerned for the overview of FutureProof Cities and Launchpad. And if there are questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thanks a lot, Serge, for this overview of your tools. That was really interesting. Again, for all participants, if you have questions, you can, from now, you can write on the chat, and we will ask them to the speakers. I saw that we had a few questions about the international context. So I'm going to give the floor to Joël too, mostly about the... so the Base Carbone is not only fed with the French data, but I'm going to let her explain the differences. And there was a question about ADEME's international competitors, so I wouldn't call it competitors, but maybe we can talk about other international databases, and maybe about the challenges of building local bases that can help the details of the emission factors.
Okay, thank you, Elise. Thank you, Serge. Maybe we can begin with Maxen's questions. I don't know, Serge, if you see on the chat Maxen's question about the databases used by FutureProof for international data. You have at the end you begin to answer to the question with the public data used. But if you can give him more detail, it could be great. And I will then jump for...
Can we share my screen again? Because I'm going to show some some sources here. Essentially, the answer is it depends on the region. For instance, if we go to Finland, you can see at the bottom here where we get our data for the overview on the Finnish level. If we go to a certain region or province and we have more details, as soon as we go to a more granular level, in this case it's still the same data I see, but let's do it for Sweden, for instance. As soon as we go to a more detailed level, we will actually show where our additional data comes from. And so it's a very long answer. If I have to answer it for all of Europe, I would invite you to go to launchpad.futureproof.com and see for the regions you're interested in. You will find you know, the sources we use. But overall, the idea there is that maybe we can stop sharing. Is that we use all the public databases that are available, and starting from the most precise one. And there's a lot of difference in what we find between countries. So some data we will have in Launchpad is actually not pretty good. It will be almost the same for a whole province, for instance. In others, we have access to more regional data. But you will find the sources at the bottom of each page whenever you go in Launchpad, and you can see for yourself, because it's a very long list.
Okay, and also a question from Laurent about the perimeter of the Launchpad result, because he said that on the cartography we have seen that in France the average emission is 4.3 kilogram per person. And is it taking into account domestic emissions, or it's only?
Yeah, there's no consumption-based data or flights, or a lot of the Scope 3 emissions are not included in there. When we use it in FutureProof Cities, we have a way of distinguishing between actions that work on Scope 1 and 2 and actions that can be Scope 3 related, because we see that this movement is becoming more and more important in cities. That we said it's great to do insulation campaigns and install bike lanes and charging points, but what about our food? What about consumption-based emissions, clothing? What about living in a zero-energy house and flying to Barcelona 4 times a year or so? So in Launchpad, this is not included. But we know, for instance, that the Swedish, the Stockholm Environmental Institute, SEI, with Fedra van Heusen, for instance, they are working on consumption-based emission data that they can regionalize to city districts. And they are going to publish the result of that research this summer, actually. And it's going to be finalized by the end of the year. It's amazing work. It's really hard, but it's a combination of life cycle data and sociological analysis, in which you look at the life pattern and the typology of whether it's families or high income young professionals or whatever, and they can map that using questionnaires to different districts in cities, and from that extrapolate what the consumption-based emissions of these citizens would be, and then add that to the the Scope 1 and 2 emissions that we measure like that. But it's a very, very hard thing to do, because as we heard in Base Carbone, it's really hard to have reliable quality data on on even the things we know, building materials, transportation, all of that. When you start to look at food, tomato, whether you buy it today or 3 months ago, it's a totally different story. Same thing with clothing, same thing with a lot of the consumption-based data. So it's coming, but it's going to be really hard to do well and to have reliable data on that, I believe.
Yes, and energy issues and Scope 1 issues different from organization to cities, as cities can work more deeper on these scopes than organizations. Okay.
Yep.
Françoise has asked a question, but I think we can see it now. It's about Italy's endeavors. She said that Italy has done a great job on the reduction of emission. Yes, of course, we have already worked with Italy at organizations level. I don't know if such you would like to to add something about city level, but they were involved on the Clean Food project. They had some voluntary organization who start calculating their carbon footprints and implement some mitigation action to reduce it. They're still working at the administration level, so I think that they have produced some data on this sector. But I don't know if Françoise would like to precise your question. It's at city level or at organization level for Italy. And we have all the questions that I have taken to note from the Bas Carbon, from Andrea. So Andrea asked if the Bas Carbon is fed with data from France only. No. Particularly for the scope 3, you can see the geographical area of each emission factors, and you have some emission factors which is available in France, other one which is available at European level, and other one which is available at world level. Particularly when it's inputs produced in Asia, for example. So you can, there is not only French data on it. And who are ADEM's international competitors? So ADEM is not a consultancy firm, but it's a public body. And ADEM's work with other European and international national agency too, to develop data, to exchange good practices, and to work on some research field together. So there's not really a competition, but more a cooperation and partnership between this kind of public body. Okay, and how many companies share their carbon footprint with ADEM, and how often on average? Question from Roxanne. You can access to the carbon footprint published by the company directly on the Bilanges website. So you can use the same account to consult the Bas Carbon and to consult the carbon footprint published also, and how often on the with the regulation it's it's every 3 years for private companies, but some companies can do it voluntarily, and some companies can also calculate their carbon footprint each year to improve themselves and see if their action has allowed to reduce their carbon footprint.
I have a comment on that
Yes.
because every 3 years, and I know for in France it's every 6 years mandatory for cities. I think it's
Yes.
laughable to do it that's a low frequency, because if you do it, you see it like that, it's a compliance mentality. You do it because you have to, and you have to be in order. If you really want to manage against that, there's no way you can do it every 2 years or every 6 years. It's as if you were only doing your financial balance every 6 years. It would be totally unacceptable to run a company like that. So unless it's at the same level of importance as your profit and your sales and your other metrics, you know, it's just a thing you do to tick a box and to be in order, and then you move into business as usual. And it's sad because we believe both cities and organizations, companies are really missing the boat if they still see that as something that has to be done rather than as an opportunity to improve your city and make sure you don't miss the boat with your company. So I'm always very skeptical when I hear those frequencies. Then I think, yeah, why even bother?
Yes, you have to go beyond the reporting phase, and also you have to add and to publish with your carbon footprint an action plan to be more concrete and to see that you will do something and not to just take the carbon. Takes your carbon footprint on your table and see, oh, now it's I have to publish now. It's the year of anniversary for my publication.
Yeah.
So that's why we distinguish two things. The first, the bilan carbon, and secondary, the reporting, the regulatory phase, because it's completely different. And if you keep in mind to do the reporting, you will not only have the good mindset and the good behavior to use the tool and the method of carbon accounting. Is there other question? Is there any trend towards consolidation of public databases like BCAR that have been created throughout the world? Um,
Good
at
question.
European level, you have at least BCAR on one side and DEFRA, the UK GHG emission factors database on the other side. You have also private databases that we have not talking about, but it is more like it's not emission factors, but you can find LCA, LCE, in which you can extract the climate data part. But I don't know if there are some consolidation at throughout the world. I don't know if Serge you have some information
Yeah,
about that.
actually, the way we got in touch, remember, is through the World Resource Institute, which have a similar thing to the Launchpad, and it's called City Data Portal, and it covers on a city level, also looking towards the past, emission inventory data for, I think, 60,000 regions, as we cover 95,000 regions, and they are mostly in North America, I think South America, India, Asia. So it's quite complementary, and we had a discussions with them before. Hey guys, it's open source. Why don't we do one big thing? But I don't know. It's not progressing. It's a big organization, and it may take some time. But yeah, it would be great. I think both for companies like what you do with Bas Carbon and what we do with Launchpad. I mean, it's not us; it's all existing organizations behind that. We just aggregate it and make it searchable and usable. This is like a no-brainer to do that, so that the real hard work is what comes after that, and I think our energy should go towards that, working with companies, working with cities, and focusing on the real hard work, and not spending time trying to find the right emission factors.
Oh, I can't see question now. I don't know if it is right. Let's the question somewhere. Maybe I remember a question about emission factors in Spain. Um, I don't know.
There's a question here in the private chat.
Yes. I was pleasantly surprised by the fact that emission factors in Basque Carbon include information about uncertainty. Oh, is this a feature which is commonly found in other databases? And do software leveraging Basque Carbon use this piece of information? Um, we have. It's important to add the uncertainty for each data, and I see that I haven't have the curiosity to see if in the other databases this information is given to users.
It's a good question on our side, and I see the follow-up question. I didn't see any indication of this in the FutureProof's demo. We don't currently use it. We used to use it when we did consultancy work. We would have a data quality table indicating how much % of our emission factors had, more or less precise, depending on if you take general information on, for instance, 4 kilometer of a company car, or if you have the specific fleet in that company and the exact liters that have been bought and gas of a given year. your uncertainty dramatically reduces. So we would have an indicator in color codes on that level. We haven't done so in future-proof cities yet, and it's a great question because the variability can be really big. The idea in future-proof cities is to dumb it down a bit and to really focus not purely on the science only, but really what are the big battles that a city needs to work on and what is a possible return. Over time, we want to improve the resolution and also the delay because it's 2-year delay between the emission inventory data and today. So we want to improve the resolution and the delay and also include feedback loops. Every field in future-proof cities that indicates progress towards a certain goal can be fed through an API. So if a city says, this is the real number of kilometers driven by an electrical bus, and we have the data, or these are the numbers of usage sessions of shared cars or something. If we have that data, we can connect it through the API and then improve our data quality. But so far, we haven't included a visualization of the data quality because we feel it's already a big step towards city users, to manage all of that. And we want to have the platform be as simple as possible for all the users.
And to complete, also, we have to have in mind that on the bilan carbon, you have to uh, you have to give an uncertainty for each activity data. It's not only for the emission factors. You have the uncertainty of the emission factors already furnished with the base carbon, but for each activity data, you should uh, give an uncertainty. It's not
Mhm.
the same if you have figures coming from a bill than a figure coming from a survey, in
Mhm.
which you have several steps to calculate before having the final results. So
Mhm.
it's maybe an accuracy to have in mind, and also to identify that the figures are not the the main issues, but you it's only a mean to identify the priority post you have to work on.
Yeah. In if I can complete, in our tool for organizations called Carbon Cap, we do include this data quality indicator. And there, the trade-off a bit about which I spoke of simplicity and being able to use it and focus on your big battles versus accuracy to really measure your progress, we resolved it in a way that if we have different data quality levels that are possible, let's say, again, for the company cars or for flights, business flights, let's say, depending on what data is available in the company, maybe you only have the amount of euros that is spent on flights every year through an agency. Okay, we will use that then to make an estimation of how much ton of CO2 that represent, but that's not great. There we will indicate that's not good quality. Maybe you have the mileage, you have X miles have been flown, so that's already better, but it's more work to get that from your travel agents. And then finally, and more organizations like IATA and others are starting to provide that. Maybe we have the real data from flights, because a flight at night or a flight during the day has a totally different greenhouse uh, uh, global warming potential. The trails of a flight, for instance, during the day slightly act as an umbrella, so slightly reflecting some of the light, whereas at night it acts as a blanket and it traps more heat. And so these differences, depending on how fine the source data you have, activity data, we link different data quality levels to it, and we indicate it with a star system how good it is. But again, it's a trade-off between getting to work with what you have and then really having people in the organizations dig for the finest level of detail that you have. And so our advice is to do this in 2 iterations. First, do it a big, rough first go through, so that you see which are likely the biggest challenges that you face. Is it in your products? Is it upstream with your products? Or is it in company? Is it your buildings or your business flights, whatever? And once you've identified the big sources, then it's useful to go and refine them to have a better. But it's no use, according to us, to start with everything from the ink on the paper of your cash registers to maybe the fuel you use to melt your metal or so. We believe it's important to have this 2080 mentality and focus on the things that that matter.
And maybe the final question from Rukmini: what is the first step that an infrastructure can implement in their politic in order to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions? Yes, and it's perfectly the 3 points I have highlighted on the conclusion. So I just put the slide on the conclusion. But maybe the first thing is to calculate your carbon footprint, to identify the most emitters post. But even if you don't have data, you can contribute and try to reduce the impact. But it will depend on the infrastructure. Is it a health infrastructure, an education infrastructure, a transport infrastructure? But for sure, the quick action you can implement is regarding the energy use, the efficiency, but you will have some result, and after that you will ask yourself, what can I do more? And then you have to interested on the scope 3 and identify if it's transporting people, transport freight, or materials inputs or waste regarding your activity sector. Maybe Serge, I don't know if you would like to add something like for a sector specific for a city, like health infrastructure, for example.
Yeah, no, I don't have a lot to add to what you just said. It's going to be basically the same kind of logic, right? Starting from what you have, and then focus on the plan going forward and improve as you go. It's without being too blasé about it, we have to be careful not to go for data fetishism, because we know the big battles often. It's more different in for companies, depending on the sector you're in. In cities, we essentially know the big battles. What we now need is the scale and the speed to be on track with the energy transition. And having access to better data is great, so that you can see your improvements and fine tune where to start, in what city district to start, where they have the worst performing real estate, for instance, or etc. But even if you don't have that level of detail, it should be good enough to get going. And then as we move to Internet of Things, smart grids, more mobility data, all of that, we will get better and better. And I think, we will find feedback loops that help us improve the data and fine tune it. But now the low-hanging fruit is clear, and I agree with your third point. Lack of data should not be an excuse to get going.
Okay. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Serge. And I hope that this webinar gives you many information. Do not hesitate to take information about your activity sector if you would like to have some some good practices or some idea on which kind of mitigation action can I put in place and implement on my organizations. And many thanks to all. We will give the slides on PDF with the replay, so you can access to it after. And I would like to warmly my thanks to Serge.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much to all. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.